I first resumed as a first year high school student, we came to the assembly ground and there was this SS3 student who committed a particular crime, and our principal then called him to the assembly and asked the school sergeant to flog him 24 lashes of cane, and the young man was asked to remove his clothes, and those 24 lashes of cane were given to that young man on his bare skin. And when he stood up with an air of pride and everything, so the junior boys and everybody on the assembly ground were clapping for him because he was looked up as a hero who could sustain and be able to endure those lashes of cane without crying, without showing any sign of pain. So while that drama was going on, as a first student, then I sat and I thought within myself, I will one day love, when I get to SS3 in 6 years' time, to be on the same assembly ground, not to be flogged, but to be celebrated. That dream came to pass when I reached SS3. I had the access, the privilege to represent my school, several quiz competitions, and won several awards from my school then. And the same principal called me on the assembly ground to give me those awards on several occasions. Now, what happened? When I saw that scenario and I knew that if I'm not going to repeat the storyline of that character, that young man in view, I had to change how I do things. So one of the greatest thing that happened to me was that I met Jesus quite earlier, and he made my life. So in knowing Jesus quite earlier, I began to invest in my life. I began to study valuable Christian books aside my Bible. So I began to study Christian books. I began to study books, and those books shaped my life. So at every moment, if I want to devote myself to master time management, I study books along that line. If I want to study books on personal growth, on different aspects, I study books along that line. And I had the privilege of having senior friends who I could lend their books from borrow books from their library and study. Two of them was Mr. James Daniel and Mr. John Akpa. So those two people had several thousands of books in their library. I read more than 600 of them. Books on time management, books on career, and several things. So, and I was also fortunate then, my mom then, as a high school student, when she gives me pocket money to go to school, I will save some money to buy Christian books to add value for myself. And sometimes she was such an amazing woman, she would literally give me sometimes the money directly if I said I need to get this Christian book, and the money I save is not able to, she would generously give me. Such an amazing woman. And so that changed my life. So I came to discover in the course of those periods that every excellent leader is a reader. Every great personality is a reader. And so because I had a dream of growing up to become great someday, I decided to sustain my reading culture. So I began to read, to become a better version of myself, to learn from others, to when I want to master a particular subject, I devote time to study books along that line. I was very inquisitive and all of that. So reading for me was the best form of self-improvement. In fact, it was the best form of mentorship because I don't need to meet a big personality. Once I come across with the books he read, or some people read some books about him, I study his principle or her principles. And so I also saw from my Bible. The Bible said the time came when Daniel was studying the books concerning the captivity of Israel. The Bible said, and I, Daniel, understood by books. Which means that if Daniel didn't study the books, he would not have known that the captivity of Israel had expired. Not just that, Jesus Christ himself, when he was talking to the disciples, he told them, the Holy Spirit that I will send into you, he shall bring all things to your remembrance. Which means that there is nothing to bring to remembrance. The Holy Spirit will have nothing to bring to remembrance. There should be something that has been deposited that will be brought to remembrance. So Paul the Apostle, the great apostle of God, writing in the Acts of the Apostles, he said, till I come, give attendance to reading. So these several characters have shown that through the Bible in contemporary times, men that study books have a lot of edge over those that don't. So by the time I concluded my high school, by the time I went for my bachelor's, by the time I went for my master's and my PhDs on scholarship, I built libraries and I've read more than 2,500 Christian books by the time before I turned 25 years, about 10 years ago. So I read books on personal development, I read books on time management, I read books on building godly character. I read books on purpose. I read books on relationship, books on marriage, books on leadership, books on finances, books on biographies, autobiographies of several great people. So the big question is, why a reading hub at this time? I came to realize recently that there is a great problem that we have now, especially with the media age. Young people especially don't have time to read any longer. And so you can see why fake things spread faster than facts. And not just that. So anybody could just read anything on any subject, come on social media, come anywhere in any platform and say anything, and you'll have people, listening to those persons. By the way, so anybody can now become an inspiration, anybody can become an influencer, anybody can become an instructor on what they know nothing about. Meanwhile, successful leaders, great personalities, great politicians, great preachers, great fathers, great mothers, great entrepreneurs, both those who are alive and some that have died, have written great books, have written their autobiographies, have written the principles they use in their businesses, in their life, in their family, to build a good home, to build a big organization. But we don't read those books. And what now happens is that because we don't read their books, we repeat their failures, we repeat their flaws, we repeat the faults they had. And of course, history repeats itself. Now just think about it. If an 80-year-old man writes, 80-year-old man or an 80-year-old woman, great man, writes a book or an autobiography of himself, and you have the access to pick up that book, and you read the book, maybe in 3-4 hours or in 2-3 days, and you finish reading the book of that 80-year-old man, his biography, where he penned down his successes, his failures, the challenges he went through, how he overcame it. If you read that book properly, you would have gained the experience of that 80-year-old man by knowledge. And some of the mistakes the person have done, you may not need to repeat them again. So, what's my mission? My mission is to reawaken the reading culture among everyone, to see how profitable books can be to your disposal and how we can stir up that reading culture to become better versions of ourselves. So I have a collection of over 15,000 books on several subjects which I mentioned earlier. So 2 things we are going to be doing by the grace of God. We're going to be discussing, we're going to be sharing together, and I hope we have great time together. So God bless you real good.